Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I want to talk about getting back to the basics. We all know, as salespeople, that communication is important. And how we communicate and how effectively we do so can determine whether we'll get the sale or advance it, move it forward. Now, sometimes we have a hard time defining things, and that causes a lot of miscommunications. In other words, people use phrases that mean one or maybe two or three other things, and you're confused as to what it means. In selling, I see that a lot. People always use phrases or words interchangeably, but sometimes using them that way, giving them multiple definitions, really creates more confusion. So what I want to do in this episode is I want to talk about some of the prospecting basics and the key phrases and terms we use in selling. So again, it might be a boring topic, but I think it's worth covering if we just define certain words. So let me begin. First definition, a customer profile. So when you hear the phrase a customer profile, what comes to mind? What should come to mind is a list of characteristics of the type of person that would buy your product or service. And if you're selling to a company, it's a list of characteristics of the type of companies that would buy your product. But within that company, there's certain people who have to make a decision. Now, a customer profile, again, is a list of characteristics. Now, there's four broad categories of characteristics. One category is demographics. A demographic could mean, where they live, married, marital status, how old are they retired, so forth and so on. That's a demographic. You can come up with a list of demographics for your ideal client. You can also come up with psychographics. Psychographic is the word psycho, not as in crazy, but in how they think. Find people's psychographic or understand their psychographics. For example, if they belong to a certain religion, then they have a certain way of thinking. If they belong to a political group, that they have a certain way of thinking. What you're looking for is to understand their mental disposition. That is psychographics. And we can create a couple of line items, characteristics of what our customer might look like, types of psychographic characteristics they may have. The third category is firmographics, as in firm, as in a company. Firmographics, that means what type of companies, if you sell it to companies, let's say you're business to business, if you sell it to a company, what are the characteristics of the ideal company that would buy your product or service? It may be, for example, a market segment, a certain industry. The company's been around for X amount of years as a minimum. They have minimum amount of employees. How many employees do they have? Or they have a minimum revenue per year. So, for example, you might be looking at a company that's in the telecommunication industry. More specifically, they're in the wireless sector. Within the wireless sector, they've been around for 5 years. They have over 100 employees, and their annual revenues are greater than $25 million. That's an idea of an example of firmographics. The last one is something interesting. And you rarely hear this phrase, behavioral graphics, as in the word behavior graphics, right? And that is, what do these people do? In other words, one, what are their habits? Do they work out? Do they run? Do they jump? Do they ski? Do they boat? Whatever it may be. What habits do they have? What activities do they participate in that will probably fit in your customer profile? So, for example, if you're selling weight loss products, you might want to look for people who are really into exercising, maybe into yoga, whatever it may be. What are their habits? So those are the four broad categories. When you look at customer profile first, is a list of characteristics, right? Customer profile, list of characteristics. There are four types of characteristics. Demographics, again, where they live, status, gender, age, so forth. Then you look at psychographics. What is their belief system? Again, religion, politics are typically two broad categories. You can probably think of a couple more. Third category, if you're selling to companies, is firmographics. What companies should I be selling to? And the last one is behavioral graphics, right? Activities, habits, and hobbies. So keep this in mind. When you're outlining your ideal customer profile, Go through the checklist, look at the demographics of who you would go after, and then look at the, let's say, firmographics, or then the psychographics, and then lastly, the behavioral graphics, what they actually do. And what might happen is you start gathering these different categories, 4 different categories with all these characteristics. And if you start tracking this, what gets fascinating, if you're using a CRM system and you're putting all this data, and again, you've categorized all 4 types of characteristics, and then you keep track of this data, you may be surprised at what the CRM, specifically those empowered with a little artificial intelligence, will be able to tell you in terms of who your ideal customer is. Fast forward what's going to happen in the future. And it's already happening. And that is, if we can load this type of data, ideal customer profile data under demographics, firmographics, psychographics, and behavioral graphics into the CRM, over time, the system, the algorithm, will be able to predict what customers are ideal for you to sell to. Why is this important? Because in order to reduce your time, your sales cycle, how fast you sell to somebody, wouldn't it be best to always sell to somebody who's more likely to buy than not? Somebody who has a propensity to buy from you. So that is a customer profile. So here's an exercise for you. Have you defined your ideal customer profile? Now, you may have 2 or 3. But that's the challenge. Come up with at least 1 ideal customer profile. But if you're smart, you'll come up with at least 3 ideal customer profiles. So when you meet these folks, you know what questions to ask to qualify them, see if they fit. But also, when they meet these characteristics under these 4 categories, 1, 2, 3, or 4, again, you'll be able to sell more effectively. So the homework listening to this podcast is to define who is your ideal customer profile. Come up with customer profile number 1, customer profile number 2, customer profile number 3, and immediately when you meet these people, you'll be able to qualify them and increase your sales conversion rate. And that is it for this Sales Influence podcast. Customer profile, keep that in mind. If you don't define who you're going after, you'll just go after everybody and wind up selling nothing. And that is it for this Sales Influence podcast. Don't forget to leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Let me know what you think. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, check out my online sales training platform, the Sales Velocity Academy. New programs every month, over 40 courses, 400 videos, and I made it so anybody can afford to get on them. So if you're serious about selling more faster and increasing your sales velocity, go to salesvelocityacademy.com. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.